Okay, for our next talk, we have aligning AI with AI commerce, and we will have Don Gossen joining us. Welcome, Don.
Thanks for making that announcement right before I go on. Everybody get out of here, go eat. Good? Just here? Okay, don't move. All right. I can move within this box. Excellent. All right. Hajime mashite. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Thank you for inviting me to the hosts of this event, Funding the Commons. I was talking about this topic, aligning AI with AI commerce, with David a few weeks ago. It's super novel. It's entirely hypothetical. It's not even theoretical at this point. It's basically something that I've pulled out of my butt, but I'll talk to why I did that. So, first off, who am I and why am I talking about this? My name is Don Gossen. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Nevermind. We are hyper-focused on AI payments. My background, this is basically the culmination of 20 years worth of work. Started in big data and ML and have advanced through to adding Web3 to that topic. I'm, I guess, OG Web3 and AI. I co-founded one of the first projects in this space called Ocean Protocol back in 2017. And yeah, this is sort of the synthesis of the last decade's worth of work. So what do we believe at Nevermind? We actually believe that what we're witnessing today is the rise of a new consumer that will manifest as trillions of AI agents, and that these agents are going to change commerce forever. This is a concept that we have termed AI commerce. And we believe that it's fundamentally imperative to address the payments mechanism between AI agents in a decentralized fashion. We see payments between AI agents in particular as being a singular choke point for all agents. If if the payment system is monopolized by one or a handful of organizations like OpenAI or Microsoft or Google, that their ability to deplatform any given AI agent will be an existential threat or pose an existential threat to all agents. Doesn't matter if the rest of the AI stack is decentralized. If it can't transact within an economic ecosystem, it might as well not exist. So we believe that decentralizing the payments piece is imperative. What we believe right now we're seeing is it's very reminiscent of the early to mid 90s. For anybody that was around for sort of the early adoption of the internet, the way that we're transacting is kind of comparatively laborious. So back then it was find somebody that you wanted to trade with through a forum or the numbers of lists that were being shared, et cetera. You'd negotiate through something like ICQ or email. And when you came to a price, you would hope that that person would send you the thing. And at least in North America, you'd play in a process called cash on delivery, where you give, I think you had that in Japan too, where you would pay the postal worker the cash, and that would get transferred to whoever sent you the item. And it wasn't until tools like PayPal came along that linked email with bank accounts that commerce on the internet, aka e-commerce, actually started to scale. So what we've been thinking about for a long time is making the equivalent to PayPal for AI and being the engine behind AI commerce. Who in the audience is familiar with AI alignment? Okay, so crash course. Basically, it's the attempt to ensure that an AI system is going to, its objectives are going to match those of the designer and or the users within the system, or at least some sort of overarching ethical objectives that have been set. The ways that this is currently being done is it's kind of a brute force means of aligning AI. You're doing it at the model level. There's three predominant or dominant means of aligning AI at the moment. One is through ethical guidelines, so you're imposing or codifying ethical frameworks within the model itself. You've probably experienced this with like GPT or diffusion models when you request like not safe for work content and you get back a response that basically says, no, I can't do that. Or maybe you experienced the early renditions of Google Gemini and their image generation functionality and asked for like an image of George Washington, and instead of getting an image of a 6'2" redhead back, you got something completely different. So this is sort of imposition of ethical standards at the model level. There's also human feedback. So I think today there's been quite a few discussions, and some of them have touched on things like reinforcement learning with human feedback. That's keeping humans in the loop, where basically you have this externality that provides inputs into the model when it performs well or when it performs poorly, and the model adjusts its reactions to that. There's also model constraints. So this is basically imposing like decision logic into the model or adjacent to the model in actual fact. So this would be like telling an autonomous vehicle to stop at red lights, and it does so. The third is what we're looking at, potentially deploying, which would be economic reinforcement. And this is less at the model level and more at the agentic AI level. And this would be using economic incentives or penalties or market forces to actually influence the agents themselves. So the question becomes, can we align AI agents via economic incentives and or penalties that are going to work in, I think, collaboration with the more direct alignment activities that are currently taking place, with the goal being, at least in our mind, using AI commerce as an AI alignment driver. So what do we need to understand first? Well, we kind of have to understand how these systems work. So anybody familiar with multi-agent systems and the agents themselves? All right, good. I'll give you a crash course in 30 seconds. So a multi-agent system is a synthetic environment consisting of more than one actor that works together in concert. And an agent is something that can perceive its environment and then use those inputs to perform directed behavior. And usually it's done in an autonomous or a semi-autonomous fashion. I think the major constraint in all of this hypothetical outlining is we're assuming that all agents in this economic environment are rational actors. If they're not rational, then most of this logic goes out the window. So what do we need, and what do we have, and what do we need? So we've got, the assumption is we have carbon-based agents, us. We have silicon-based agents, the AIs. We're going to need some kind of communication protocol, and then we're going to need incentive mechanisms, penalty mechanisms, and some means of signaling and discovering what's out there, likely through a marketplace or marketplaces, and imbued within these marketplaces are probably regulatory constraints and some kind of monitoring interface. Who is familiar with Smallville? So this is a study that came out of Stanford last year. A group of computer scientists created this experiment. They created 25 AI agents, gave them a bunch of personalities, and then set them loose in this ecosystem simulated world for 2 days. Asked them a bunch of questions after the fact and got a bunch of really interesting answers. So the architecture of these agents was basically what you see. They had the means to perceive, but they were also imbued with the capacity to memorialize those perceptions into memory and then recall that memory, which they can then use to plan and reflect on their activities. And those influence the actions of each of these agents. Some interesting activities ended up taking place. One of which was like, instead of these agents would go to lunch, right? And instead of going to a cafe, they would go to a bar. So it was also almost like they were day drinking. And this lacked, outside influences from, say, a commercial point of view, where, if we all went to a bar for lunch and got ripped and then went back to work, we'd probably get fired. So, what we're talking about is actually introducing these types of economic incentives, or in this case, you get fired. It's a penalty for performing certain actions in the system. I think this is quite a novel approach, perhaps more harmonious, and possibly easier to influence agents than through direct management at the model level. I think we can also leverage existing precedent. So, I think it's pretty apropos that I'm delivering this presentation at the UN University, because this is right up the UN's alley. But what are we actually talking about? What are the patterns that we can leverage to enforce these economic patterns? Obviously, some form of international relations, aid or trade to influence certain behaviors. The alternative to that would be trade sanctions and embargoes. You perform a certain way, you're going to be removed or isolated within the system. At a more discrete level, we have systems like labor unions and employment that ensure certain behaviors within given constraints. And then more recently, obviously from a decentralized point of view, there has been the emergence of DAOs and decentralized governance, all of which I think we can take cues from to help influence the way that we align AI. Just looking back historically, we can go back millennia to look at discrete explicit examples, Athenians banning Megara traders within their marketplaces and basically annihilating the Megara city-state in the process. Napoleon had the continental system, which tried to block trade with Great Britain, Marshall Plan, et cetera, et cetera. So what can we do? Well, we can look at the incentives. What we're talking about here is likely rewarding these agents, either AI agent to AI agent rewards, which are already emerging in video games and in the Web3 space, GameFi. You've obviously got direct compensation, so paying for certain behaviors to be invoked by agents, as well as general gamification through tiered incentive structures. I think the advantages here is that the major one being you introduce probably proactive, beneficial behavior. The disadvantage is incentive programs for anybody that's been involved in points mining in the crypto space. You know that this stuff can get gamed pretty easily. Then there are the penalties. Obviously, you can introduce fines and sanctions for certain behavior. You could restrict access based on certain behavior, and you could introduce reputational damage if an agent acts in a certain way. The advantages here, obviously, you can employ strong deterrents that are going to oppose sort of harmful and unethical behavior. The disadvantage of these types of systems is that they lead to likely adversarial behavior. I think we see this at a macro level from a political standpoint. There are examples of this already taking place. The state of Arizona worked with Tesla on aligning autonomous vehicles and following proper driving protocols. The motivation there was to reduce insurance premiums. We've seen this in HRRP in the United States, which is hospital readmission reduction program. So these are penalties if patients get if they return to a hospital after a diagnosis. Algorithms have been deployed in order to combat this and reduce those penalties. And then more recently, we've seen the emergence of personal traders that are basically AIs that get a commission on the returns, as well as AI content creators. So making content go viral, making it stickier, etc., in order to have higher retention on sites that are content related. Challenges that we need to consider in all of this. Obviously, there are going to be a lot of challenges in designing the incentives. They need to be fair, they need to be effective, but they also need to be practical from a technology point of view. We want to avoid any collateral damage or unforeseen problems that are going to come out of this economic alignment system. Obviously, there could be a lot of unintended consequences. We want to balance the short and long-term objectives of both the agents and the overall system. And then there are obviously the ethical considerations. We do want to, limit biases, etc. So I'll leave you with this. What do we need to happen next? From our point of view, there needs to be a focus on commercially viable agentic AI. So we need to start producing AIs and agentic AIs that are productive in nature. We're seeing this start to emerge. Once that happens, imbuing these agents with the capacity to pay and get paid will then give us the means to start to invoke these commercial incentive schemes. And lastly, I think what we also need to do is recognize our limitation on the influence that we're going to have with these systems. In all likelihood, these AIs are going to operate at, on a dimension that we're just ambivalent to. So recognizing that probably the best we can all do is ingratiate ourselves in the system and not try to control it is the way to go. And I've got a minute for questions. So opening up the table. I don't know if you need a microphone. Do I go to him?
Thank you, it's really wonderful sharing. It was really interesting to see that using the economic incentives to strengthen the AI alignments. And I have a few questions about how to setting up these kind of penalties or the incentives, because you know that there's a lot of different values that might have contradicted with each other, or maybe you have to have the priorities on each other. So how to set up these kind of fair standard or very nice standard to decide it, who can decide it that these kind of behavior should be fined or these kind of behaviors be strengthened with the kind of incentives?
Good question. My answer is I don't have an answer. Yeah, I think I think we can look at crypto in a sense to see how you can govern the chaos of the masses through potential tokenization and align incentives that way. That's one means of doing it. I think the concern is that biases get baked into the system based on who has the largest economic influence on these agents, right? Yeah, at this point, I don't have an answer. I mean, this is something we've only been thinking about for, I don't know, a quarter or two. But if you have an answer, by all means, let me know. Anything else? All right. Arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you so much. Thank you.